at one point that Krugman and Ferguson address is that Obama's stimulus package was not as effective as it was made out to be. You're actually going a little bit farther than saying that they're both talking about the same thing. You're even taking it to the point where you're saying they both have similar things to say about the same topic, right? They both think that the stimulus didn't work, right? And now you can say, but they think it didn't work for different reasons, right? Ferguson because he doesn't believe in government spending, and Krugman because it wasn't enough government spending, right? So you bring them together in order to separate them, right? And that lays a really good groundwork for your articulation of their arguments later on in your paper. So this is how they're the same, and this is how they're different. This has nothing to do with that. This has nothing to do with the overall goal, right? I mean, it's spot on. Ferguson does exactly these things, right? Ferguson does specifically provide impressive figures in order to focus his attention on present economic developments, specifically the rising yield on treasury bonds, right? That's what his whole paper, that's the central piece of evidence in his whole paper, right? He basically gets to say, aha, Krugman, you're wrong, because I was saying that T-bill yields are going to go up, and then they did, right? And you said they weren't, but they did, right? So his whole argument is pivots on his model's predictive capacity, right? So while this does get close to like the central point in his argument, I think you want to save this for later, because you're not talking about their central points. You're talking about the general ways in which they differ, right? So I think you've just taken this to one level down on the specificity scale. I think you want to abstract just a little bit and talk about Krugman. Krugman has this perspective with respect to the stimulus. Ferguson has this perspective, right? And contrast them off one another. This might even be enough, right? This might be sufficient if you decide to make this essentially the core of your introduction, right? Because then you're going to spend your subsequent paragraphs splitting them off from one another, right? Before you bring them back together in some kind of analysis of the particular frames that they use to analyze things. So I want to get to these second couple of paragraphs. Okay, so I'm just going to walk us through them and assume that you guys read them for homework. Okay, I do have an outlined revision schedule that I'm going to post to the site, and you're going to want to download the document in order to see this track changes stuff, because I don't think that's going to post on the wiki. Okay, so what John does here is John takes two paragraphs and brings them together into one, right? In fact, he brings three paragraphs together, because this breakdown here, you all may have noticed that this last section down here doesn't appear in the original. That last section down there didn't appear in the original. But what John's done is John's basically decided that that in talking about Krugman, he may as well just get it all done in one fell swoop, right? And so he talks about what Krugman does, which is mostly up here, and then he gets on to how Krugman does it, right? So Krugman's talking about, so Krugman draws a parallel between the Great Depression and the current economic crisis. That's what he does, right? How does he do it? Well, he goes about it by drawing this tricky parallel, what you call pulling a fake out, right? Where he says, imagine that you've got all of this. Imagine that you've got all of these economic troubles, lists them all, and then says, aha, I'm talking about 1938, not today, right? So that's your fake out. And I like how you put that into your own terms and you make it make sense for us, right? But then you sort of give the game up, because right here, because right up here, right, only to reveal that he is actually talking about the Great Depression. So that's the fake out, right? Where he draws you in, flips you. That's right to put these two paragraphs together. But note what you do next, right? He pulls a fake out. He goes on to address the bad decisions made, right? Near the end of his argument, Krugman pulls together all of his musings, right? So look at what you've done there. You're basically following the order that Krugman gave to his own argument in order to give structure to your own. And a lot of people did this, right? A lot of people said, Krugman next does this, then he does this other thing, and finally does this final thing. And once we look at the whole arc, we can see X, Y, and Z, right? That can be effective, especially when you're talking about a sort of dramatic reveal to show that things happen in a certain order for a certain reason, right? But you don't want to get trapped by the order. You don't want to get trapped by the logic of the person you're writing about, right? And so when you up here say, only to reveal, this is in your own words. And this does your own thing, right? Right? Like, only to reveal is sort of a logical differentiation. He does X in order to, right? Is different than saying he does X and then he does Y, right? Because now you're giving a reason behind it. So what you want to do is stick to modes where you're talking about things in your own terms in order to draw a meaning out that you've found in it, right? So you want to start with this only to reveal bit in order to show how he draws a very strong parallel between the two, in fact equating the two, which basically serves the purpose of, right? So what's his goal in doing that? His goal is to say, well, if the conditions are exactly the same and the solution worked last time, then there should be no argument about what the solution is now, right? So he tries to get you into a box, right? Because he doesn't say, oh, the solutions are sort of similar, right? This whole trick about the revelation that you're keying into is basically made to make us see zero difference between the two, right? And once he provides this solution, he finishes on an optimistic note. Here's what following Krugman's logic has done to your argument, is that this is your characterization of what Krugman is saying, right? But you're putting it at the end, because he put it at the end. You should put it at the beginning, because it's your big idea, right? So you're saying that he's being optimistic, and then you can show how he's being optimistic, which is this. Last time it worked, we know exactly what we're doing now, so it'll work this time, right? That's pretty optimistic structure. We've got a way out, and we know exactly what to do, right? So you can spend the rest of your paragraph like breaking down what you mean by optimistic, right? As opposed to getting to it at the end. Because this is sort of the case in point of what a lot of people were noticing last time. What a lot of people were noticing when they were talking about your use of quotes is that you're sort of letting this stand on its own and not spending the time explaining it. You'll have all the time in the world to explain it if you put it at the beginning of your paragraph. The reason I chose John's paragraphs here is because these questions of ordering your argument and giving a certain logic to your argument are common issues that almost all of you had noted at some point or other in your argument, right? Put your ideas at the front and then unpack them. Don't give up the game to someone else when you have a good idea, right? Okay, so I've got the outlines to post to the website. They'll all be up on the class page.
Where are we finding this? You sent an email, but I forget.